Good morning.
Good morning, DCJ and members of the JSC.
How are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. Just a little nervous.
No, you don't need to be. Okay, let's get right to it. You hold a BProc degree from Wits University,
Yes, I do.
and you got a Best BProc Graduate of the Transvaal Award for that.
I was nominated for the best graduate for that particular year. I didn't get the award in the end. But
Oh, you didn't?
I was one of the nominees.
Okay.
DCJ.
What motivated the nomination? Were you a brilliant student? What was that about?
I suppose I was just above average, and the marks in my exams were above average, yes.
All right. But you did not further your studies thereafter?
I didn't. I started my LLB, but then I started my articles at the same time.
You went straight to the sidebar, and you remained there.
And then then the one thing led to the other. I then prepared for my exams, my admission exams, and I was just kept so busy in practice that I never really had a chance to further my studies.
Yeah. And you worked your way up such that by the time you ascended to the bench, you were managing partner of your firm.
Indeed, DCJ. Yeah. By the time I left, I had been there for I think about 26 years, and by then I had been a partner for about 10 to 15 years or so, and I had been the managing partner for also about 6 years or so.
Yeah. What kind of practice did you run? What kind of work did you do?
I personally had a general practice, but my focus was litigation and trial advocacy. I did a lot of the court appearances on behalf of my firm in the High Court. Obviously started off in the Magistrates Court, and then later in the High Court I did all of the court appearances. And my firm had a big RAF practice and personal injury division, and most of my work was in that field. But I also did a lot of other work outside of the RAF work, including commercial type matters, that general practice type of work.
Yeah. And you became a judge in 2017?
January 2017, DCJ.
So you've been on the bench for what, 6 years?
Over 7 years.
7 years, yes.
Yeah. 7 years and 3 months.
Had you acted before your permanent appointment?
Yeah, before my permanent appointment, I had acted in the Gauteng division, and the total number of weeks I seem to recall was just over 30 weeks in total, which included one whole term in the year before I got appointed.
Yes. And you have had occasion to write judgments during your tenure at the High Court.
Yes.
Some which have been reported.
Indeed, DCJ. Yeah, I think I mentioned when I was here in October, by then the total was in excess of 300 published judgments. The total reported ones was, I think, over 10. Yeah.
That's a huge output, I must say. I see that of all those judgments, only 3 have been overturned on appeal.
Yes, yeah. I think last year particularly there were quite a number of judgments that had been upheld that I had written. They may or may not have been included in my list. They were towards the end of the year, yeah,
Yes.
which is quite encouraging.
Yeah. And in 10, you were upheld,
Yes.
including by the SCA. You have acted at the Electoral Court since November last year?
My appointment was effective the 1st of November 2023 DCJ. And immediately after my appointment, I started receiving from the chairperson matters, and I set to date, I set in 3 matters, was involved in a number of other matters which needed to be decided on the papers. Yes, so I have been acting in that court since the 1st of November of last year.
Have you written a judgment?
I've written one judgment, and sorry, I wrote one judgment, and I was part of the panel that wrote the judgment that came out last week.
Well, the first one, you have not submitted both of them to us to have a look at.
I know that they were published on the one that I wrote was published on the.
Well, I can excuse last week's one, but what about the other one?
Yeah, I think that one was also towards the end. It was towards the middle of February. That's in fact, it's ironically called the February matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I just omitted to submit that particular judgment. It's on safely as well, DCJ, in addition to being published on the SCA website.
Well, it would have been nice to have it in your bundle. So we know that you can write. You've written pretty good judgments for the High Court. I have no doubt that you do the same in the Electoral Court. But it would have been nice to have one in hand, in hard copy, to check.
I can't agree with you more. Now that I'm sitting here, I should have actually submitted those to the JSC.
Yeah.
And I apologize
that's all
for
right.
that.
Well, it's big. You're still new in that court. It's big election year.
It is, yeah.
One can safely predict that things are going to get extremely hot. Are you up for the challenge?
I think I am, DCJ. It's already, and Chief Justice Zondi will confirm that the matters are just flowing in at the moment, and it really is a big year. It is quite exciting times for electoral court judges. It's the pressure is there. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of matters, and they obviously need to be attended to urgently. And I think I'm up to the task.
You listed a few reserved judgments in your questionnaire. Have you managed to deliver those?
Yeah, all 4. I think it was 4 judgments. All 4 of those have been handed down very shortly after I submitted my application.
Okay. You disclosed a health condition. Well, it's no shame. You have high blood pressure and high cholesterol, which many of us suffer from. Do those hamper the execution of your judicial duties in any way?
Not at all. I don't think so, DCJ. It's under control, and I see my medical practitioner on an annual basis. And yeah, I think it's all under control. I'm on medication for both conditions.
I ask because I also suffer from high blood pressure because of all the stress. And despite a healthy lifestyle, it acts up. So in addition to the medication, I would advise you to go hard on exercise and make sure you eat well.
No, I do. I try and keep fit from time to time. I also do some road running from time to time, DCJ. So I do keep that in check. And like I say, I religiously take my medication like clockwork.
All right. Thank you, Judge Adams. I'm going to hand over to Chairperson Zondi to put questions to you.
Thank you, DCJ.
Okay. Morning, Judge Adams.
Morning, Justice Zondi.
I see you submitted your application to the JSC in November 2023. That's the date on which it's
Oh, okay, yes, yeah.
Page 12 of the bundle. And then The judgment that the DCJ referred to, that is the judgment of February, which involved the leadership dispute. That judgment was delivered when? Was it in February or? That is after you had submitted your application.
Yeah, it was, I think, in the first or the second week of February, because we heard the matter at the end of January, and and I prepared the judgment a week or so after we heard the matter.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like I think the second week of February.
And then, since you joined the Electoral Court, where we have been involved in a number of cases, and more especially between March and now, we have received more than 20 applications, some of them involving the nomination.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you participated in all those cases?
In all of those matters. In fact, we also sat in a hearing last week, Friday, involving consolidated matters.
Yes.
Yeah, it was last week, Friday. Yeah.
Okay. And as the DCJ indicated, as at October last year, you had written about 300 judgments.
Yes, in excess of 300. I think they've gone to about 340 now since then.
And in addition that, I see that you had also written some articles, and which were published, one of them in the Terribles. Is that correct?
That's it, yes. Yeah, that was whilst I was in practice, Justice Zondi.
Okay. Thank you, DCJ. I've got nothing further to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Zondi.
Thanks, Justice Zondi.
DP Bese?
Thank you, DCJ. Good morning, Judge Adams.
Morning, Justice Betsy, Deputy President.
I would like to take you through the questionnaire.
Yes.
At page 4, paragraph 16.1 in particular. Let me know once you are there.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is electoral court vacancy. No, this is feedback.
It's paginated page 7 of the bundle.
Yes, I'm there,
Thank
Deputy
you.
President. Yeah.
Paragraph 16.1, the caption is, list the cases where you have written the judgment, not more than 10, which you regard as being the most significant. You have listed the judgments. But the second part as to why you consider those judgments significant, speaking for myself, you haven't dealt with that at all. All what you have said, this is what the case was all about. This was a review of a regional magistrate's decision. This one was about public procurement. And one needs to troll through your judgments to determine whether the matters are significant or not. Isn't that a serious omission?
Yeah, now that you mention it, Deputy President, maybe it is. I suppose I assumed that by looking at the very short summary, one can see from that what the significance is. For example, ILEX, the very first matter, dealt with public procurement, and whilst I had set aside the award, I thought that it would be inappropriate from a remedial point of view to set aside the contract. Sorry, whilst I declared unconstitutional the award of the contract, I thought it would be inappropriate and unjust to set aside the contract. But yeah, I hear your criticism Deputy President, and I accept it.
Because those are the type of cases which appear before our courts day in, day out.
Yes, yeah.
And you don't tell the members of the commission why you regard that is the one where you wrote judgments to be significant.
Yes.
That is the principle which they propounded or enunciated
Yeah.
or clarified. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks,
Thank
DP.
you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you, TP. Any Commissioner Dodo?
Thank you very much, DCJ. Good morning, Justice.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good. You were here 6 months ago.
Yes.
Yes,
No.
in October last year, and
I was.
you were somehow not successful. And I remember that one of the concerns was that you lacked the experience or exposure to the electoral court, and now you have acquired it, and you are an acting judge at the level of the electoral court. But there are concerns about you. Some of the people have raised some concerns. One is Deshan Modley, who lodged an objection about your candidature. He says that that he made an application for a rescission of judgment, and is of the view that you are biased and you are unfair. How do you respond to that?
I actually responded formally to that
I want you to formalize it now.
that objection. So Mr. Woodley was.
Excuse me, Commissioner Dodov and Judge Adams. Can I just find out from the complaints committee if they considered this objection and what their verdict was?
Yes, Deputy Chief Justice, we did. We dismissed it. This is a complaint that is coming for the second time. We dismissed it last year in October. We dismissed it now. It has also come as a complaint to the JCC, and it was dismissed by the JCC on the 7th of April. So it's been dismissed 3 times now.
Well,
In the light of that, you
yeah.
want him to formally explain, or should I go to the next question?
to the next question. Well,
Or to the next question.
Since it's been dismissed, there's no objection before us practically.
No, in the light of that, it is okay. Now, since you acted as a judge at the Electoral Court to date, what are the outstanding cases that you can cite that you presided over? And what lessons have you learned out of that, out of those cases?
Commissioner, I haven't presided over any of the matters because of the fact that I'm obviously not one of the senior panel members, but I've been involved in the matter in which I was allocated as the scribe by the chairperson. That's the February matter. And that matter dealt with the jurisdiction of the Electoral Court in relation to disputes, internal disputes in political parties, factional fighting, and that is the judgment that I wrote. Obviously, the point about that matter is that the Electoral Court is intricately involved in the disputes relating to leaderships of political parties. It forms a very important part of the jurisdiction of the Electoral Court. In addition to that, of late, we've been involved in the matter relating to the registration of political parties and the fact that the procedure that one needs to follow in terms of the Electoral Court, if you have an objection to the proposed registration of a political party, the procedure to be followed. And if that procedure is not followed, then in a way you're non-suited. Also been involved in a matter fairly recently relating to the special votes overseas. And I've learned that I understand the position and the procedure that one follows as prescribed by the Electoral Court. So those are the issues that I've been able to learn from my experiences.
And where you sit, you can confidently say that you're finding your feet, you're getting all right, you're getting the necessary experience and exposure as a result of that short stint that you had at the level of the Electoral Court.
I think I have, Commissioner. I most certainly think so. I definitely don't profess to know everything about electoral law, but they say that the next best thing to knowing something is knowing where to find it. And I understand what the legislative framework is, and I'm also familiar with the important case laws, the case law relating to the important principles in electoral law.
I thank you, DCJ.
Commissioner Nyambi?
Thank you, DCJ. Morning, Judge Adams, on this side.
Oh, sorry, yes, hi, Commissioner.
As they've indicated that we interviewed you last October. So in your view, what is the significance of the Electoral Court in upholding democracy?
I think importantly, Commissioner, the underlying constitutional principle relating to elections is the political rights enshrined in our Constitution, the right to vote and the right to stand for public positions. The Electoral Court has a duty to ensure that those rights are protected. And importantly, the Electoral Court duty is to ensure that the principle relating to the requirement that elections must be free and fair, and that principle is implemented by the Electoral Court, who's required to deal with those type of issues as and when matters come before it. Because ultimately the main criterion in electoral law matters is a decision whether or not an election is free and fair. And if the court is of the view that that is not the case, then it needs to take the correct remedial action as it did in the CUM matter in 2013, where the by-elections were set aside. So in sum, I believe that the contribution from the Electoral Court is ensuring that that constitutional principle is complied with by the IEC and by the other arms of government.
Thanks. My last question. When we were here last October, there was that strong view from the commissioners that you needed to have some opportunity to act. And now we are sitting here, we have had that opportunity. Do you think that decision then was unfair? You were ready then, or you are more than ready now? It was a wise decision from the commission.
Yeah, I think it may have been, with the benefit of hindsight, not a bad idea that I was given an opportunity to act, and that I was basically given a chance to just get a bit more experience. Because if the truth be told, up and until that point, I had very little exposure to electoral court and electoral matters. Although, as I indicated in my interview in October, that I had a keen interest in electoral court, and that interest has just been reignited by my involvement in the electoral court. It truly is such an important part of our everyday life. And it relates to such a fundamental human right that I said last year, that it's quite exciting to be involved in this field on the part of the judiciary.
Thanks, Judge Adams. Thank you, DCJ.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Club?
Thank you very much, DCJ. Good morning, Judge.
Morning, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Parliament in our context, consists of two houses, NA and NCOP. How are members of the NCOP elected?
Sure, yeah. I understand that the members of the National Assembly are taken from the, they appointed from the list, the party's list that you submit to the Electoral Commission before before the elections. I also understand that as far as the NCOP is concerned, that those are appointed by the legislatures of the provinces, who are appointed directly from the lists of the political parties for the provincial legislatures.
What is the main function of the NCOP as distinct from the NA in the lawmaking process?
Yeah, I think the NCOP is in a supporting role to the National Assembly. Their purpose is distinct from the lawmaking processes of the National Assembly. Although they, like I say, they in a supporting role to those. They deal with very specific issues that is dealt with in the legislation.
Can you explain it in terms of the competencies of each of the two houses as it relates to lawmaking process? In other words, why in the lawmaking process do we need an NCOP?
Yeah. I must be honest, Commissioner, I'm not really familiar with that particular field. I know that obviously our primary lawmaker is the National Assembly. I would take a guess and say that the NCOP, its lawmaking competencies relate specifically to the provinces, but I may very well be mistaken.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Thank you, DCJ.
Commissioner Steinberg.
Morning, Judge Adams.
Morning, Commissioner Steinberg.
I just want to follow up on the question that Deputy President Petse asked you, the Alex case. You didn't actually tell us why it is a case of significance. His view was that it's a bread and butter tender review. Why do you think it's a case of some significance?
Well, the answer that I gave to the DP is that I thought that and I know that there's been a lot of cases on this point, in fact, by the Constitutional Court, for example, that is a lot more significant. But I thought the significance lies in the fact that as happened many times before, the award was declared unlawful, but the just and equitable remedy ordered that the contract was to continue. So it may be, now that you mentioned it, that it's not as significant as I thought it is, but in the bigger scheme of things, I thought that it's significant. I can't take it any further than that, Commissioner, sorry.
Okay, it just seems to me that really is something that happens every day in the courts. So,
Yeah, true.
But that's your answer, thank you.
Commissioner Marumagai.
Thank you very much, DCJ. Good morning, Judge.
Morning, Commissioner.
I agree with you. This is probably one of the most important areas that deals literally with our everyday life. And when I was preparing for this interview, I saw that there are so many acts of parliament that your court has to consider at different intervals. Sometimes national elections, sometimes municipal elections, and all. And I got confused somehow in between as to which act really applies when. And I just want clarity with respect to that. Normally, when you're talking about the constitutional court and you ask somebody what is the jurisdictional elements of that court, it's like constitutional matters and arguable points of whatever, those two legs. When we talk about the electoral court, if somebody says, how does this court assume jurisdiction on a matter? If I'm a potential litigant, the member of a political party, or I have political interest and I want to take a matter to that court, what are the jurisdictional elements that I should concern myself with for me to be able to properly be before that particular court? Because we saw even in the cases that were heard over the past week, the issues of jurisdiction came to light, and they proved to be very important. What are those jurisdictional elements that one needs to concern themselves with to bring the matter to your court?
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I think the jurisdiction of the Electoral Court is spelt out in the Electoral Commission Act, obviously as regard based with having in mind what the Constitution says about it, but in sum, the Electoral Commission Act deals with the jurisdiction of the Electoral Court. Importantly, the Electoral Court is empowered and required to adjudicate electoral disputes in relation to decisions made by the Electoral Commission. Importantly, the Electoral Court has the jurisdiction to review decisions of the Electoral Commission on the basis of parja and or on the basis of legality and rationality. The Electoral Court also has the jurisdiction in terms of the Electoral Commissions Act to adjudicate appeals from decisions of the Electoral Commission, as well as deciding, like I indicated earlier, disputes between internally in political parties relating to leadership. But in sum, the jurisdiction of the Electoral Court comes from the enabling legislation, importantly, the Electoral Commissions Act.
Can I just follow up on that? And I'm asking this because I'm purely confused in terms of my research, and I don't really know what sort, and I'll take your word for it. And what is the role then of the Electoral Code and the Electoral Act? I'm not sure, is it still in force? Is it still applicable? No, because when I went through it, it seems like it does provide jurisdictional elements to some extent. What then will be the issue if there is a conflict between the act that we've just referred to, the Commission Act, and this Electoral Act? What will then be, to the extent that there is a conflict? Yeah.
No, Commissioner, the Electoral Court deals with mainly procedural issues relating to elections. It makes provision, for example, that the Electoral Commission is to prepare a timetable, etc. It deals with mainly electoral issues. The Electoral Commission Act, and there's, as far as I could see, there's really no conflict between the two pieces of legislation. The Electoral Commission Act deals with the constitution of the Electoral Commission and the Electoral Court and the powers of these two bodies, whereas the Electoral Act itself deals with the elections, the procedures that one follows before, during, and after an election. But it really relates to electoral procedural matters, whereas the Electoral Commission Act deals mainly with the Electoral Commission of SA and the Electoral Court of SA and its powers.
Thank you very much, Judge. Thank you very much, DCJ.
Commissioner Magonish?
Thank you very much, DCJ. Good morning, Judge Adams.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Just two quick questions. On what day will the mandate of the National Assembly expire and that of the NCOP?
On the 29th of May, 2024, unless the President changes the date of the election.
And the MPs will be competent to act until what time? Or on which day, until which date?
I think until the next administration is appointed, but in terms of the legislation, it must be within 90 days from the 29th of May.
The NCOP?
The same applies to them. I think.
At what point does a president of the country ceases to be a member of parliament?
On his appointment as the president.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, DCJ.
Commissioner Singh?
Thank you very much, DCJ. Good morning to all commissioners and admin support, and good morning, Judge Adams.
Good morning, Commissioner Singh.
Yeah, my first question will just relate, it's a query actually, your reserve judgments that you listed in your application. Have you dealt with all of those?
I did, I most certainly did. Okay. Like I indicated to the DCJ, they probably were handed down within a week or two after I submitted my application.
Thank you for that. In the last interview, you spoke of, and we referred to the New Nation judgment. And you also spoke about it now. It was a seminal judgment, for electoral and the way we conduct elections and who can participate in the South African electoral system. Now, without traversing on the jurisdiction and the separation of powers, looking at the separation of powers between Parliament and the Judiciary and the Executive, do you think that Parliament went far enough to accommodate what you all had considered in the New Nation judgment as far as independence participation is concerned?
What subsequently happened, Commissioner Singh, as you know, is that we've got the OSA, the judgment by the Constitutional Court that dealt with the amendments to the Act. And the comment or the finding by the Constitutional Court was that as far as the amendment to the Electoral Act is concerned, that was inadequate in the sense that as far as independence is concerned, the requirement for supporters or list of supporters was too high. And the Constitutional Court, no less, was of the view that needs to be dealt with by Parliament. Obviously, it can't be done before present elections, and they had indicated that particular provision was not properly dealt with. But other than that, the Constitutional Court has indicated that as for the rest, all seems to be above board. And the Constitutional Court seems to be happy with what Parliament has done, and I tend to agree with that.
If I may continue, DCJ, Parliament had to give effect to ensure that independents can participate. Are you aware of the Electoral Matters Amendment Bill that came before the NA and the NCOP recently, and do you know what those amendments entailed?
I can't say that. Is it recently? Is it after the Open Nations of SA matter?
Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago, I would imagine, that the NA considered it, and a few days later the NCOP considered it. It hasn't been signed into law by the President, but are you aware of what the amendments were to the Electoral Matters Amendment Bill?
I can't say that I do, Commissioner Singh, no.
Okay, and my last question would be, through you, DCJ, is that you were one of 5 in a panel with ANC versus the Electoral Commission matter. Now, how significant a role...
Sorry, which matter?
ANC versus the Electoral Commission.
Oh, yes.
You're one of 5 members in the panel.
Yeah.
What role did you play, significant role, in the court reaching that judgment, and what legal principles applied in that particular matter?
Yeah. Commissioner Singh, I wasn't involved I was involved in the MK versus IEC at ANC matter. I wasn't involved in yesterday's matter. Is that the one you
Yes, okay.
Yes, okay. Yeah, the principle in the ANC matter was a procedural one, and it specifically relates, as I indicated earlier, to the registration of a party and the Electoral Commission's duty to follow the right procedure. In that particular matter, and the important principle in the matter was that the Chief Electoral Officer has a duty to register a party upon application. And the issue in that matter was simply whether the Chief Electoral Officer had before him an application for the registration of the MK party, and we found that it did. The objection, as far from the ANC side, we found ought to have been done in terms of the Act. It required that if you have an objection to the registration of a party, once the proposed registration is published in the Government Gazette, you have 14 days within which to object. If you don't object, then for all intents and purposes, you are non-suited, in a sense, to object further to the registration of that party. And once that party is registered, then there's not much that can be done other than to review the final registration, which is what the ANC attempted to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, DCJ.
DCJ, could I just do a follow-up to the second question of Commissioner Singh? Judge Adams, can I just ask you back to your knowledge of the current legal position insofar as the amendments are concerned? Some of them were debated in the one movement case, one SA movement case that was decided in December last year. But it's really in relation to the changes to Schedule 1A, because that's the schedule that tells us the composition of the National Assembly post the inclusion of independent candidates.
Yes.
What will that look like?
Commissioner, my understanding was that it related specifically to the recalculation in the event of an independent resigning or retiring or dying, and I seem to recall that the Constitutional Court was of the view that those I don't know if...
No, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you about the judgment.
Oh, okay.
I'm asking you about your knowledge of what the current electoral laws are. In particular, the changes that were brought about by the Electoral Laws Amendment Act.
Yes.
Some of them were debated in the judgment, but what I'm asking you now is the big change is in the composition of the National Assembly by Schedule 1, capital A. Now that independents are in the mix, what will the National Assembly composition look like? At the moment, we know it's 350 minimum up to 400, all made from lists submitted by political parties.
Oh, okay.
At the moment, what will it look like after the 29th of May?
Yeah. So we will have 400 members of parliament, Commissioner. 200 of those would come from political parties, and the other 200 would come either from political parties or from independents. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, what about the so-called compensatory seats? I thought that's what Commissioner Singh was talking about, that the big complaint is on the compensatory seats that still favors political parties.
The compensatory seats would then also be split between the independents and political parties, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any questions from the colleagues on the virtual platform? No. That brings us to the end of your interview, Judge Adams. And unless you have any questions for us, you're excused.
I have no questions, DCJ. Thank you to you and thank you to the members of the JSC.
Thank you for coming.
hearing me. Thank you.